I believe in skin in the game when it comes to voting. And this was actually my first cancel attempt ever on X, was because I said the 19th Amendment was a mistake. And it got people talking. So essentially...
Why was it a mistake?
Because, going back to what Congressman Massie said about how you used to be able to own property to vote, voting was left to the states. And that's why it's not written into our Constitution, saying this is how voting's going to work, aside from, the electoral count.
Quick pause. Just for people who don't know, the 19th Amendment is women's right to vote. Sorry, continue.
It sure is. So essentially, the states were given the power to run their states and vote in their states as they saw fit for their states. So even before the Civil War, there were territories, Wyoming and Colorado, that were having women and freed slaves vote in their elections already, because they're like, well, this fits us. So this is how we're going to do it in our state. And, for the same reason that we don't have a direct democracy where all the states vote and we get this, oh my God, I forgot the word.
National popular.
Thank you. National popular vote. It's the same reason we don't have that, because what's good for California isn't good for Wyoming, for instance. So doing it this way with the states, it might not be great for people who don't own property to vote in a certain state. It might not be great for women or men to vote in a certain state. And so it'd be up to their state legislatures to decide what that is, up to the voters to decide what that is. What is the best way to vote in our state? And I believe that's the way it was written into our Constitution. However, once there is now some federal legislation when it comes to who gets to vote in the elections, and there's 4 amendments. There's 15, 19, 24, and 26, and they all say it is the right of the citizens to vote this way. So that also answers the, who gets to vote in the elections. It was always intended for citizens to be voters in the elections.
Mm-hmm. Although I just need to insert this fact that the apportionment of congressional seats and also electoral college votes counts illegal aliens in the apportionment.
Yep.
So California has 4 or 5 extra electoral votes in the presidential race by virtue of harboring millions of illegal immigrants.
Is this something that can be undone on a state level?
Purpose. We know that.
Can Trump executive order this?
So Wilbur Ross, who conducts the census, he was the Secretary of Commerce when Trump was president before. He tried just to introduce the question of whether you're a citizen or not on the census. And there was so much blowback, and I think they gave up the fight. Hopefully Trump will bring this fight again and at least ask the question. And then
I think Trump should...
Governor DeSantis is trying to do this right now in Florida, but the legislature is refusing to cooperate with him.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, because it's politically risky. There's going to be Republicans
who are
lose.
It's the rhinos that are leading the charge, and because they're worried they're going to lose votes and they're not going to be able to.
That was the whole idea, to get them not to have IDs.
In whatever way Trump can, he should be issuing executive orders on this.
Mm-hmm.
It is limited because it's there's a constitutional question, and then it's a legislative question. But I'm sure there's some policy Trump can take that can at least smooth out the edges a little bit or something.
The last census, I have heard stories of there being significant irregularities in it, and that being a massive problem. And also that speaks to the importance of the census coming up in 2030, first of all. And second of all, there was a policy by the Health and Human Services, by HHS, to transport essentially illegal migrants, people that came here and said that they were looking for asylum, but it was anyone that could get here. It was called the Refugee Resettlement Program. Hopefully, the Trump administration will end that. But what they were doing is that was the program in which they were actually taking people that came and claimed asylum and moving them specifically to places that were purple states, in order to get them in order to get more votes for Democrats.
But you know who the refugee is by the international law. The refugee is a person who flees from the country on conflict to the first safe country. You're not traveling around the world. So when I'm asked about the refugee, how many refugees Poland have taken, Katie Newman, I said 0. She was out. I was outraged. How can you say that? I'm proud of that.
Next time I go visit Spain or France or Germany, just maybe to take in the culture, if people ask me what I'm doing there, I'll just say I'm a refugee.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can.
And that's it.
then
You know.
I'll be paying for your
Refugee
bloody
on-
hotel
on
bill,
holiday.
Tim.
No.
What's interesting, I have heard the Trump administration may amend the 1951 Refugee Convention, because the phrase in there, it's very similar to AOC's Green New Deal, was a refugee is anyone unable or unwilling to return to their country of origin. So if you just don't feel like it at the end of your holiday,
I'm unwilling to pay taxes.
But the
I'm a
point-
tax
the
refugee.
The point of me bringing this up is this is something that was funded by the government to basically water down the votes of conservatives, and partially to the goal was to establish a one party control over the whole country. And that was one of the things that Elon Musk took a lot of flack for pointing out, that people were coming to the country, they were being moved around the country by the government, by the Democrats, and they were using federal money to do it. So they're using tax money from Republicans to basically water down Republican votes.
this is why we actually have such a high volume of Indian migration in the UK. So Rishi Sunak, who now lives in your country, by the way, he's in California.
He moved there permanently?
He's going to move over permanently, yeah.
Wow.
So, he just cut and run. I suppose he called a election because he wanted to get his kids into a nice school by the next term early. He wrote a paper in 2014, something like The Changing Face of Britain, and he noted that Indians voted at a larger propensity than other ethnic minorities for conservative parties. And so he said, he did an interview with Qatari-funded media Al Jazeera, and he said, the politicians over there, pointing to the Houses of Parliament, might want to take note of that. And it just so happens when you had an Indian Home Secretary in Priti Patel and an Indian Prime Minister who cooed out the previous two, Rishi Sunak, we got 1 million Indians in 4 years. I wonder why that happened.
To me, it seems fairly logical. Trump ends birthright citizenship. We had Ro Khanna here the other day, who's a very reasonable man. I'm actually curious, before I go into this, what your thoughts are on Rep. Ro Khanna. You think we've found him very reasonable?
I
Wrong.
appreciate that he's an ideologue and not a partisan. Now, a lot of people think those words are synonyms, but they're actually opposites that I've found. And I don't know if Dominik has this experience too, but before I got to Congress, I would hear these words used as pejorative. Oh, he's such an ideologue, or he's such a partisan.
Yeah.
What a partisan is they vote with their party every day. They don't even need to read the bills. They get the whip report on which way to vote that day. But it's hard for me to work across the aisle with a partisan by definition. But if you can find an ideologue on the other side of the aisle who happens to be a Democrat, occasionally your views agree. Like on the issues of foreign intervention, Ro Khanna and I would agree.
Now,
On stopping
when we were talking, he's in favor of illegal immigrants being given some form of amnesty or path to citizenship, as you would call it. And I think that exemplifies the issue with mass migration. I describe it with a simple analogy. You live in an apartment with a roommate. Every Friday, you pool your money and you vote for lunch. And it's 50-50 sometimes, so you got to compromise. But, you often order pizza and wings. One day you wake up and there's a guy sleeping on your couch. And you go, hey, who is this? And your roommate says, that's Jim. He got kicked out. He has nowhere to go. He was being abused, and please let him stay here. And you say, all right, fine, because I'm a nice guy.
Night or two.
And next thing that, it's Friday and it's time to vote for lunch, and he's not put any money in, but you say, I want pizza and wings again. And your roommate says, no, we're going to get chicken salad sandwich. And then Jim says, yeah, chicken salad sandwich. And you say, hey, you haven't been paying into our food. And he says, yeah, but 2 against 1. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And then you don't get your lunch anymore. And you say, okay, I guess it's okay. I don't need to eat pizza. But one piece of what you are familiar with, what you wanted, has been taken away. But here's where it gets worse. Next day, you wake up, there's another guy sleeping on the couch. And you say, whoa, I didn't agree to this. And then your roommate and Jim both vote. No, he can stay. 2 against 1. Now it's 3 against 1. Then 4 against 1. With so I'm not saying this to make it sound like I'm against immigration. I like O1. I think getting brain drain, all these things are good, but it's got to be legal. It's got to be limited. We can't sacrifice the interests of the next generation for people who don't live in this country.
Simple.
But there's a mathematical equation here that's very simple and logical. There is a number by which if you bring in non-Americans into this country and give them residency, not even citizenship, their cultural values will outweigh the cultural values of those that have lived here. And it's not a race thing. As Tucker Carlson said, the interests of Black Americans are the exact same as the interests of Americans. The concern is people who are not American. So if I wake up and I have what I describe as Christmas morning, we have pumpkin pie, we have warm apple pie, we have baseball. Where I grew up in Chicago, we have black people, we have Latinos, we had Asians who all loved Christmas and apple pie, and we grew up sharing in the same culture. But if you have at a very short moment a mass influx of people from all parts of the world, then you get cultural dilution. And at a certain point, the things you love and believe in, the traditions you care about, and your laws are diluted and weighed down by the interests of people who don't share them with you. So if we follow on the path of the Biden administration continuously, eventually the country will be not just unrecognizable, but ungovernable in a very bad way.
Well, it's the same when you're going to Saudi Arabia in your bikini.
Yeah,
right?
Good luck. You go to prison.
You see, and it's the same when you're going to India and then
Try and eat a burger.
for example,
Right.
like really,
Well, here's a
raw meat, and you want this really bloody burger, and
here's an example. Well, I'll throw on top. I went to Egypt, and the Hilton's breakfast, they had American continental breakfast. The bacon was actually beef.
Mhm.
It was because you can't have pork.
Yeah.
But there was a story in the United States where an Indian man went to Taco Bell and he ordered a burrito and he said no beef. They gave him beef and he bit it and chewed it and swallowed and then realized he had eaten beef, which was sacrilege. And he sued and he won a good sum. This is an old story from a couple decades ago. That's interesting. How would this Taco Bell worker known that he was condemning a man to hell or whatever because he accidentally put the ground beef that they sell in this restaurant? And that just, I'm not saying anybody was right or wrong. I'm just saying the cultural differences lead to these kinds of conflicts.
So in Europe, because of the leftism, this situation went so far that in schools, kids are not allowed, Christian kids are not allowed to have sandwiches with the meat at all. If all beef, but if you want to have a nice piggy sandwich, you're not allowed because you might offend someone. I had this discussion with the lady. I'm at the airport very often in Brussels, and she was telling me about her kids. They can't have a sandwiches with ham. They can't she cannot make a sandwich because someone might be offended. Can you believe that?
That's an absurdity.
That's reality in European Union. And this is what we do not want in Poland. We don't have it, and we're going to protect our culture. We're going to fight for it because I love my ham and I love my sausage.
Americans
That's it.
couldn't live without bacon.
Can I issue
That's
a correction on
This is the
myself
part of
I've
our
been
culture.
thinking about since I said it? Women in Wyoming actually got the right to vote slightly after the Civil War. But my point is that it wasn't 1919. They didn't have the states' right. I just wanted to issue that
And
correction.
I think the important thing about the 19th Amendment was that it the reason why it was a mistake. I'll pause so that the left and the feminists can take this clip. The 19th Amendment was a mistake. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, I'll clarify what I really mean by that. Actually, I have no problem with women voting. I'm not saying that women should not be able to vote. I'm saying that the reason people opposed the suffrage movement, including many women, was because voting came with civic responsibility, like the fire brigade. And the anti-suffragettes, that's what they were called, right?
yes.
They were saying, I don't want to be compelled to serve in fire brigade. That's men's work. I don't need to vote. And ultimately, there was a compromise where they said, we'll pass the amendment. Women will receive no civic responsibility, but they will receive civic benefit. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. That's not me slighting women. That was actually the compromise made by the Congress and the states at the time, was that they were not going to impose civic responsibility on women, but they would grant them the right to vote. I believe right now there must be an answer to the draft question, as it is in absolute violation of, in my view, many our rights in general, but also the 1964 Civil Rights Act. The idea that only men are required to sign up for selective service, but women are entitled to all rights and privileges without the responsibilities. So right now, this would impose, I believe, an unjust requirement on men that is not on women. So you have one of two options. Something's wrong with the 1964 Civil Rights Act, or something's wrong with the 19th Amendment, but you got to pick one of them.
Real quick on that issue of commitment to public service, I was talking to my Amish raw milk supplier, and I bring him news.
As we do.
Yes.
I bring him news from the outside occasionally. And
I love this.
they do buy like soap and stuff from the outside world, and he was talking about inflation, and they said, well, a lot of that's caused by those stimulus checks, but I'm sure you don't know about those. You didn't get those. He's like, oh no, we got the checks. And I'm like, what'd you do with them? We burned them. and I said, why did you burn them? And he says, you take the check, before you know it, they send you to war.
Yeah.
Like,
That's right.
because right now they have conscientious objector status, by default. If you're Amish, you don't
Amish are
enter
great.
the draft.
Yeah.
We have up by us. We have a lot of Amish farms.
But he didn't expect to take the money and then not be obligated to war later on.
Right.
Smart. I just wanted to weigh in on what you said, Tim. So you asked if there was either something wrong with the 1964 Civil Rights Act or the draft as it was. The 1964 Civil Rights Act was absolutely correct, as it said that communists are not people. And this is true.
Okay.
So it can't possibly be that.
So we need to issue a fact check clarification. She's not joking. It actually says that. It says that it's something to the effect of, this law shall not be construed to provide protections for communist groups or organizations that are communist. That's kind of crazy when you think about it. That's codified. That means that you could assert an ideology and strip yourself of rights in this country.
Yeah, and that's been upheld. That's been upheld in New York against teachers. Yeah, there's a case that it's been upheld in, and somebody can fact check me on this in the chat.
So in all seriousness, I do think. Well, let me say this first. Democrats are in favor of women being drafted. They, whenever the question has arisen, it's largely been Democrats who have said we want this, and for equality reasons. Republicans, on moral traditionalist reasons, say women should not be in combat or in the military.
No, women should definitely not be drafted. This is, once you are sending women to fight your wars, you don't have a country.
Once you are draft doesn't mean combat.
It doesn't mean combat. But once you're sending women into these positions, forcing women into these positions, the people who carry the babies and carry on the next line of the future, you don't really have a country. What are you fighting for? You're not really fighting for the future of your country when you're sending everybody that makes the babies into war to defend the soil.
Well, we have a problem right now in this country that has been quite acrimonious in that women are not required to provide equal responsibility, and it's a fact. Women don't have to sign up for selective service. This is unconstitutional. This is a violation of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So something must be remedied here.
I think they should just get rid of it altogether. I don't think men or women should be conscripted or forced to serve in a war that they don't want to fight in.
I disagree on that.
What's your opinion?
Conscription, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't believe the founding fathers were intending to be like, we are going to force young men to get on boats, go halfway around the world, and go fight for some resource in some faraway land no one's heard of. I think the intention of conscription, part of the reason why they removed, there was a portion, and you probably know this, the portion of the original Second Amendment, which I think was like Article 5 or something, stated that
Article 4.
Was it 4? Conscription was not I forgot the exact wording, but there was a phrase that you did not need to serve in the military to have a right to bear arms. And they were concerned that by leaving that in, it could be construed as you don't have to be conscripted. And so they said, let's just simplify it. Conscription at the time was, if we get invaded and our homeland is being burned down and our lives are destroyed, we are going to bring young men to come and fight with us. What it's turned into is, we have a peacekeeping operation in Vietnam where we faked an attack on one of our vessels to generate public support for, and now you are hereby forced against your will to go fight it. So there's a difference in what it means to be drafted in what the corrupt issue was versus what it really is. My view is, if any adversary of these United States started storming the beaches of the United States, I got to be honest, if the Democrats were in power, as we saw with the establishment, I'd tell them to screw off, and I'd look to my family. But in a pure sense, assuming there's no corruption in government, if someone attacks our country, I would respond with, what can I do? Tell me where to stand. I will help.
It's hard because young men who are, primarily military-age men in our country, they don't love our country. And I mean, I honestly don't blame them the way that they're treated. And
I blame TikTok.
Yeah, it's TikTok. So the way that they're treated, men are demoralized. They're not taken for jobs that they are qualified for. They they're not as educated as the left would say as others, because they might go into a trade or something. They're just very demoralized, and so they're like, what is the point? We don't love our country. I'm never going to get married. I don't know if I want kids. Like, they're ruined by porn, they're ruined by TikTok, they're ruined by all of these all this shit coming in. So why on earth would they want to die for this country, a country that does this to them?
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.